Welcome to Dream Big Today. My name is Debbie, and this is Wednesday, March the 27th, and this happens to be my oldest favorite granddaughter's birthday, and she's 19 today. So, Hannah, if you're watching today or at any time, happy birthday to you, sweet girl. God's got so many things in your future that I just can't hardly wait to see what happens. So, welcome. I'm so glad that you're joining us this cold, chilly morning in Oklahoma. Elizabeth is under the weather, so keep her in prayers this morning. And we'll get started here in just a second. I want to start with just a little bit of my devotion this morning. It's just really good. And it probably can flow with our reading in Deuteronomy. If you want to turn to Deuteronomy 7, that's where we'll start. And so this morning, my devotion says, Eternal God, I realize that problems are inescapable, woven into every fabric of this fallen world. Yet I confess that I go into problem-solving mode too readily, acting as if I have the capacity to fix everything. Why do we do that? Why don't we just go to Him first? Why don't we just bury our problems and then wait a little bit and let Him handle it instead of us feeling like we have to jump in there and take care of it? I don't want to let fixing things be such a high priority in my life anymore. Lord, I delight in pondering the wondrous truth that I'm on my way to heaven. Help me stay focused on You, letting my problems fade in the glorious light of eternity. So if you would, put your prayer request and your praise reports in the chat box, and I will look at those after we get through this morning. So if you're new to this, put your name, where you're from, in the chat box, and so we can get acquainted with you too. We've got a lot of people coming on that watch us throughout the day, and it doesn't even have to be today. They can, since it's recorded, you can watch it any time. And we kind of like to see where you're from, because we're getting some people from other countries that's joining us also. Excuse me. So let's get started. It's just such a good word today in Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy 1 says, when the Lord your God brings you into the land you are about to enter and occupy. Oh, the very first word should catch you. It says when. It doesn't say if. It says when. That's certainty. He is going to do what He says He's going to do. Do you believe that? When you read through the promises in the Word, do you believe that word? Or are you thinking that, oh, that doesn't apply to me? This is 2024. This is old times. Well, God's promises, as we read, are forever, to up to 1,000 generations and beyond. When the Lord your God brings you into the land you are about to enter and occupy, He will, that's a promise, clear out the many nations ahead of you. And then He names 7 nations. These 7 nations were greater and stronger, more numerous than the Israelites. How in the world can that possibly be, that this group of people that's smaller and not as strong as these other nations will drive them out? How many people do you suppose huddled together in their little camel tent and said, this makes no sense? But all we have to know is God with us is stronger than those without Him. When, not if, but when, God promised to fulfill this. Philippians 1:6 says, for I am confident of this very thing, that He who began a good work in you will perfect it until the day of Christ Jesus. Paul was confident we can also be confident. The Lord your God. Moses continually emphasizes that Yahweh is Israel's God. He says this 279 times in 239 verses, over and over and over. If we don't get that, we don't get anything. Repetition is what embeds it into our minds. If you go through this, and which is what I did, because I like to highlight everything, but I highlighted every time it said the Lord your God or any reference to him. And in this today's reading alone, there was 24 times that he says that. Israel had to believe the promises and show they truly believed by acting out these promises. And that's where we should be today. God tells us all through his word what he will do. There's conditions. There's conditions to some things. He says in verse 2, when the Lord your God hands these nations over to you to conquer them, you must completely destroy them. You must. When he does, you've got some stuff to do. You must not make a treaty. You must show them no mercy. Oh, but isn't he a God of love? Yes, he is. But he is cleaning out the stuff for them, and they have to help with some of this. These 7 nations were greater and bigger, and it wouldn't make sense for this group of men to enter the battlefield where there was no man plan. The success of this battle was God's doing, not theirs. God's promises are possessed by faith that obeys. Jeremiah 33 says, I will also give them back to the land I gave to their forefathers, and they shall possess it. So, May 14th, 1948 is when Israel was given statehood. But this is not the final fulfillment that awaits. We have 3 adversaries: the world, the flesh, and the devil. All are greater and stronger than we are on our own natural strength. Romans 8:13 says, for if you are living according to the flesh, you must die. But if by the Spirit you are putting to death the deeds of the body, you will live. So let's move on. The rest of it is full of promises. After telling them what they must do, then let's look down to verse 9. Understand, therefore, that the Lord your God is indeed God. He is the faithful God who keeps his covenant for 1,000 generations and lavishes his unfailing love on those who love him and obey his commands. So, verse 10 says, but he does not hesitate to punish and destroy those who reject him. There's a promise, divine retribution. Verse 12, we start the abundant blessings of obedience. It starts out by if. This is a condition. If you listen to these regulations and faithfully obey them, the Lord your God will keep his covenant of unfailing love with you, as he promised with an oath to your ancestors. Whose ancestors? That would be ours. This is another promise. Listen, keep, and do. Verse 13, he will love you and bless you, and he will give you many children. He will give you fertility of the land. What will he do? He will bless you. These are divine blessings. Verse 14, You will be blessed above the nations and earth. This promise, superior supernatural blessings. Verse 15, and the Lord will protect you from all sickness. This is another promise. Divine preventative health care. It doesn't get any better than that. You must, verse 16, you must destroy all the nations the Lord your God hands over to you. You must, without a doubt. You have to do this. And then let's jump on down to verse 20. And then, after you do all of this, the Lord your God will send terror to drive out the few survivors still hiding from you. This is a prophetic promise of divine hornets. 22 is another promise. The Lord your God will drive out the nations ahead of you little by little. You will not clear them all out at once. Otherwise, the wild animals would multiply too quickly for you. This promise, doing it all at once, might seem easier to some, maybe. But there's consequences. There's a reason why he says what he says and does what he does. Verse 23, another promise. But the Lord your God will hand them over to you. He will throw them into complete confusion. Verse 24, he will put kings in your power. And you will erase their names from the face of the earth. And then we hit a command. Verse 25 and 26. You must burn their idols. You must not covet. You must not take it, or it will trap you. It's detestable to the Lord, your God. Do not bring any detestable objects into your home. You must utterly detest such things. Is there anything detestable in your house right now that you ought to take out of there? You don't think about a lot of things, but what if? Do you have a rabbit's foot? Do you have a horoscope? Do you have that Ouija game? Do you have any of that stuff that's witchcraft in your house? Get rid of it. Throw it away. Chapter 8, verse 1 is our promises. More promises. He says, be carefully to obey the commands I am giving you today. What happens if you do? Then you will live and multiply, and you will enter and occupy the land. Then we start with kind of like Moses is giving them then the remembrances. Remember how the Lord your God led you through the wilderness? We got to remember our past, not to dwell on it, but remember what happened and how he helped you through that. This is something you can pass on to your children and grandchildren. Sometimes we don't always remember as well as we did in the past, but we can still recall things. Moses is reminding them of this, of their past. An 11-day journey became a 40-year trek in the wilderness. But God was with them. God walked through them. He provided for them. He led them with a cloud every day. It doesn't get much easier and simpler than that. We sit here wondering, well, I'm waiting on an answer from God. Well, he hovered over them with this cloud. And then in verse 5, oh, I can't stop. I gotta wait. I still have to do 2. Oh, this is so good. So 40 years in the wilderness, and he humbled them and tested them. Sometimes we're tested by fire. And he provided them manna. Can you just imagine? To me, it would be like getting up and gathering up a whole bunch of graham crackers. In fact, I ate a couple of those this morning when I got up, and I thought, oh, this is my manna right now. But manna, as you know, means what it is. What is it? It was all they needed. And then, for all these 40 years, your clothes didn't wear out and your feet didn't blister or swell. God's power is amazing. We can't even wrap our minds around something like that. We don't understand what things like that whenever we read it. But God can do anything, far more than we can imagine, guess, or request in our wildest dreams. Now we get to number 5. And it says, think about it. Just as a parent disciplines a child, the Lord your God disciplines you for your own good. So this is, and I'm going to get my other Bible out here. The New King James Version has the wording that I want for this. Because he's telling, first in verse 2, he's telling them to remember. And then in verse 5, he says, you should know. Like, right now, you should know. We learn from the past, but we don't live in the past. Paul talks about forgetting the past and reaching forward. Forgetting the past doesn't mean failing to remember. It just means that we're not going to let it have an unhealthy influence on us. Then look at verse 6. Therefore, you shall keep the commandments of the Lord your God. He's talking about the future. You shall keep. It's not just for today, and it wasn't for yesteryear. It is for the future. Keep the commandments. Obedience is always a response to love. You say you love somebody? Well, are you obeying what Jesus said for you to do? Jesus said, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. So, question, does what you say get canceled out by what you do? The fourth thing, if we look in verse 10, when you have eaten and are full, then you shall bless the Lord your God for the good land which he has given you. Let thanksgiving compel you. When you have eaten, gratitude is the attitude that sets the altitude. Jesus healed 10 lepers, but only one came back and thanked him. Why would that be? Didn't all of them get healed? They did. Just one wrote it down in his thankful journal and came back and thanked him in person. Continue reading all of this. This is one of the best ones, I think. Well, yesterday was good too, and tomorrow will be good. Everything you read in the Bible is really good. So jump in there today and finish out Deuteronomy. Let's hop into Luke right now. Luke 7:36 through 8:3. And this is talks about one of the Pharisees asked Jesus to have dinner with him. So when they sat down to eat, a certain immoral woman from that city heard he was eating there. Now I still, when I see the Pharisees asking Jesus to come eat with them, have dinner with them, sure, Jesus is going to go, and he'll go to anybody's home. Doesn't matter who they are. But they're always trying to trap him or get some evidence on him so they can justify their crucifixion and all of their court trials and things like that. But what we see in this story about this immoral woman is she was a sinner. Jesus spoke of that her sins were many, as we go on down to see. Now first let's see what she did. She brought a beautiful alabaster jar filled with expensive perfume. She knelt behind him at his feet, weeping. Her tears fell on his feet, and she wiped them off with her hair. Then she kept kissing his feet and putting perfume on them. So she came to Jesus. She stood behind him weeping. She kissed his feet and anointed them. Hers was faith that walked by love. The kiss spoke of affection of the heart, while the precious perfume told of a willingness to consecrate her all to him. And then the results, look at verse 44. Then he turned to the woman and said to Simon, look at this woman kneeling here. When I entered her home, when I entered your home, you didn't offer me water to wash the dust off my feet, but she's washed them with her tears and wiped them with her hair. See, Simon did he had social errors going on there. He neglected to wash Jesus's feet. He didn't anoint his head with oil, and he didn't offer him a kiss as a greeting, which was common in their culture. The grateful prostitute sins were forgiven, but not that of the stingy religious leader. So she was approved. Her manner of approach had Jesus' most gracious welcome. And then she was forgiven. And then she was assured, thy faith has saved thee. Faith in Christ not only saved her from the guilt of sin, but also from its power. And then what's the last thing that he said? Jesus said to the woman, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. Go in peace, because we are justified by faith. Romans 5:1 says, therefore, having been justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. So, this, in chapter 8:1, it says, soon afterward, Jesus began a tour of the nearby towns, preaching and announcing the good news. He took the 12 disciples, along with some women who were cured of evil spirits, diseases. Among them was Mary Magdalene, whom he cast out 7 demons, Joanna, the wife of Chuza, Herod's business manager, Susanna. This is the second tour of Galilee, and this time, taking the 12 with him, he mentions these women, which is unusual. For the other rabbis generally didn't teach women and include them in their circle, but Jesus wasn't like other rabbis. Everybody was created equal. Everybody was the same to him. Let's jump into the Psalms right now. Psalm 69, 1 through 18. And just a real quick one here. Psalm 69, 1 through 18 is the most quoted Psalms in the New Testament. He starts out saying, save me, O God, for the floodwaters are up to my neck. The pain of reproach and disapproval can break the heart of the righteous, but God can still deliver. David experienced the pain of much unjustified persecution, but this Psalms has clear messianic implications throughout. In verse 2, he says, deeper and deeper I sink into the mire. I can't find a foothold. I am deep in water and the floods overwhelm me. Have you ever had that feeling that you're about to suffocate? You can't catch a breath. You're not the only one. Look how long ago it was that David wrote this. This is how he felt at this time. When we feel moments like that, and I say feel because feelings come and go. They don't stay the same. You can feel one way today and wait a little while. You'll feel different in another time. But what are you doing during that time you're feeling? Get yourself into the Word. Open it up and go into the Psalms and just read and meditate. Put that Bible, that hardback Bible on your lap and turn the pages and read what David says. He's pleading through this whole psalm today. He says in verse 13, "But I keep praying to you, Lord, hoping this time you will show me favor." But the key is he keeps praying. He keeps looking up. He's got emotions. Look, we remember, and we will talk more about David's life as we continue in the Old Testament. And he had a lot of family issues. There were things that weren't right that was going on, that we would just be shocked if this took place in our family today. But he's praying. He is continually praying to God and asking for his help. And that is something that we need to do today. We need to continue praying and asking God for help in everything. My devotion was talking about not being in control. We're not the fix-it person. We're the prayer person. Stop, drop, and pray before you do anything. So, you have a blessed day. I'm so glad you joined me this morning, and I may be